hands. And most outcome measures in your value-based contracts, such as the ACO 33's clinical measures, require patients to change their behavior, such as losing weight, taking medication regularly, exercising and eating right, etc. A1Cs don't get lowered on their own. Admissions aren't avoided without educating patients how to recognize and manage their asthma. And just recording that someone is depressed doesn't change that fact. And it's never as simple as telling a patient what to do. Most patients know what they should do, but like all of us, there are other things that get in the way. In order to help patients more effectively, we will need to have more information about them. Take this example of Oscar. Remember, we are managing people, not patients or metrics. While our protocols and care planning may tell us that we need Oscar to do all these things on the top on this slide, Oscar may have his own agenda that may or may not line up with ours. Patient engagement is all about learning what's important to patients as people in order to help them manage their health. There are two recent reports that highlight the need for and trend towards collecting and using more data from patients. It's the most relevant information we could have to understand patient goals and barriers related to their health. Think again about Oscar, but also about each of us. What makes us, quote, stick to the program 1 week and fall off the next? What information does our care team really need when we are sick or at risk to help us help ourselves? Our A1C or the fact that we are consumed with an aging parent? And as you will hear, collecting and acting upon patient-generated data is now far more feasible if we apply the many ways technology can assist us. Many of you may be aware that NCQA has now released the 2014 PCMH standards, which will replace the 2011 standards in March 2015. These standards, aligned with Meaningful Use Stage 2, have definitely raised the bar on patient engagement for primary care practices. This table offers some examples, such as encouraging the use of e-visits and other electronic forms of information sharing and communication, requiring practices to take a patient's language and culture into account, proactively reminding patients of care they need and how to decide what's best for them, including patient goals and care planning, and integrating behavioral health services into the practice. Now let's look at the measures. Many of you are in Medicare shared savings programs or similar ACOs, so you may recognize this group of measures. These 5 measures, taken together, are the all-or-nothing diabetes composite metrics. But if you aren't familiar with them, this means that an MSSP ACO only gets points for these metrics if they are all met for each sample patient. There is no partial credit. Notice that these 5 metrics are all outcome measures rather than process measures, which means that it's not sufficient to have an A1C test. That's process, but the A1C result must be less than 8. The same is true for the other components in this composite measure. Note, too, that achieving a positive result on these metrics requires the patient to take action beyond getting a test. The patient must take steps to achieve the clinical outcomes sought: diet, exercise, medication adherence, smoking cessation, and more. And many patients may also need counseling, coaching, financial support, and other resources to help them focus on their health. This is probably why CMS has determined that ACOs that achieve 36.5% or higher on this composite measure are indeed top performers. This is hard because it really requires patients to engage. And many of us, many organizations, do have patient portals in place as stipulated by Meaningful Use 2 and that are becoming more and more prevalent. But in fact, as we will see through this presentation, that having a patient portal does not equal patient engagement. The notion of I am my own medical home comes out of some visioning scenarios for the future of primary care. Even though some of us have Fitbits and a personal health record, this slide begins to show how all of us will be using our own data to manage our health and maybe share it with our providers. Again, powered by technology and encouraged by financial and personal incentives, people will be able to use data to help and motivate themselves for their own triple aim. As I turn the presentation over to Kate, think about how many patients you need to reach and engage today. Kate?
Well, Karen, thank you so much to you and to the FITEL team for including me in this program, and what a wonderful introduction you've made to this topic. And thank you all also for joining us for the discussion of patient engagement and how to navigate the path forward to improve care models. I wanted to get started by, just doing a few polling questions to get you all really thinking about what this topic means to you, and to also help us learn more about our audience. So first of all, how important, so let's just take a moment to complete this. So please indicate how important is patient engagement to your organization today. And I think you can only pick one. You can only pick one answer here, and we'll give you a moment to respond, and then we'll see what the results show. So can we see the results? All right. It looks like no surprise, since you all are attending a patient engagement webinar, but so 78% say patient engagement is very, very, very important to your organization today, and the other 19% say important, with just one person probably saying neutral, but nobody's saying it's not important to us. So excellent, not a big surprise there, but certainly I suspect a few years ago you might have had different answers. It's definitely become increasingly important. So let's go to the next question. How many of you actually have access to your own personal health record? Again, let's just take a moment and give you some time to answer one, pick one. And when it looks like we have a good response, let's go to the results. Interesting. So more than half actually do have access. That's interesting. I think that's higher than I typically see. And then about 37% does not have access, and some don't know. So that's actually not too bad. I think we all do our banking electronically, but we don't all have access to our records. But over half is pretty good. Let's go to the third question. And how many of you are able to communicate effectively with your entire patient population? I can do it all the time, I can do it some of the time, or I can't do it at all. So again, take a moment to respond, and we'll take a look at the results. So hardly anybody, just 8% can do this all of the time, but 61% can do this some of the time, and about a third can't do this at all. So I guess doing it some of the time is pretty good. We have about 2/3 there almost, and 1/3 that can't at all. So certainly there's room for progress. So thank you. I think it's good to kind of get a sense of where everyone is, and I will get into the presentation now. So just to share briefly an introduction, hopefully some of you are familiar with National eHealth Collaborative. NEHC is a public-private partnership. It was originally created by Mike Leavitt when he was the Secretary of Health and Human Services during the Bush administration. And the organization focused on accelerating effective use of health IT to advance health and transform healthcare while creating more patient-centered, patient and family-centeredness, if you will, with better outcomes and greater value. As Karen mentioned, we really worked very, very closely with the Office of the National Coordinator for Health IT, and our major programs included health IT education, you might remember NEHC University, health information exchange, and consumer engagement. So not too long ago, we actually merged National eHealth Collaborative into the HIMSS Foundation, and as part of that merger, HIMSS actually created a new Center for Patient and Family-Centered Care, which will, which our, patient engagement work will live there and be expanded upon, and HIMSS will continue to invest and grow that effort, and that'll be the focus. The consumer engagement topic will be our focus for today. So let's go to the next slide, please. So why, just to reiterate some of the points that Karen made, it's really important to start with why is patient engagement important. There are really a lot of important trends and business requirements as well as consumer expectations that are really driving this forward. There's no question in my mind, and I think in most people's minds today, that we cannot reduce healthcare costs and improve outcomes without much more effectively leveraging health IT to engage both patients and their families. We all hear about the emergence and growth in accountable care that's really being driven by public and private payers, employers as well. This direction is really changing the incentives and creating more alignment across the continuum of providers, including encouraging care to be provided in the lowest cost setting possible, including the home. So, and with the aging of the population and the, significant amount of cost and risk associated with chronic conditions, there's a really great opportunity to leverage health IT to better manage people with those types of conditions. And this can have a dramatic impact on the quality of life for many people, as well as the costs and other outcomes that we need to see. So, expectations are also really changing based on, consumer experiences in other industries. Technology has certainly transformed how we communicate with each other, how we manage our finances, how we shop, and obviously our travel, just to highlight a few examples. Unfortunately, healthcare has largely lagged behind in terms of allowing technology to improve the convenience and accessibility, the flow of information, and access to services. I think the key is that there's plenty of evidence to show, and growing evidence, that engaged patients do indeed have better outcomes. So if we're going to make real progress toward improving individual and population health and improving the cost, quality, and ultimately the value outcomes in healthcare, we need to more effectively use health IT to engage patients, their families, and their extended caregiver team. Next slide, please. So you can just click through. I wanted to highlight that Accenture did a really interesting survey last year, and I just wanted to highlight a few of the very top-line conclusions. So they found that there's a disconnect between consumer and physician expectations as it relates to digitizing healthcare. As you can see, so about 4 out of 5 people, basically consumers, believe that they should have full access to their medical record, but only 1/3 of physicians actually share that view or agree. And perhaps it's coincidental, but only 1/3 of U.S. consumers actually have access to their full medical record. So clearly, we've got a disconnect here. Furthermore, the Accenture survey showed that more than half of U.S. consumers would actually change physicians if that meant they would gain access to their medical record by doing so. So people are prepared to vote with their feet. And interestingly, more than half of American consumers are already tracking some of their personal health information. So there appears to be a real appetite for this among the U.S. consumers, and the need isn't entirely being met, obviously, so we have a lot of work to do. There appears to be an important opportunity to capitalize on people's interests, to more effectively engage them, and to improve their health outcomes. The next slide, please. So as I mentioned, National eHealth Collaborative really made it one of our very top priorities to bring stakeholders together to figure out how to advance consumer engagement in eHealth. And we had a number of efforts to accomplish this, and I'll just highlight a few. Last year, we did a really interesting project for the Office of the National Coordinator, specifically on patient-generated health information, which Karen mentioned earlier. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this project in a moment. We launched a consumer consortium on eHealth to begin an industry-wide collaboration and sharing related to consumer engagement. One of the most important outcomes of that effort was the patient engagement framework, which I will describe in detail as part of this presentation. This was the result of a wonderful collaborative effort among diverse stakeholders with an interest in defining patient engagement in eHealth and actually creating a roadmap to enable progress in the right direction. We also created a Consumer Engagement Advisory Council to guide our strategies and programs, played a role in supporting ONC's consumer engagement efforts, such as the Blue Button, and through our NEHC University webinars shared examples of best practices, success stories, and other learnings in an interactive setting. Next slide, please. So just a few more remarks on the patient-generated health information project that I highlighted that we did with the Office of the National Coordinator last year. So what we did is we really convened an expert panel. This, eye chart here is a list of all of the people who served on our expert panel, and it was a really diverse and impressive group of people, both patient and caregiver perspectives, physicians and other clinicians, policymakers, standards experts, and people with technical expertise, really kind of the full spectrum of perspective. And the initial focus of the work was really to very specifically identify existing good practices for the use of technology to enhance patients' input into their care, with an emphasis at first on the recommended, the relevant meaningful use stage 3 recommendations. So there were just a handful of recommendations in stage 3 that related to patient-generated health information. So we started with trying to offer ONC some feedback on those specific items, which was really hard to keep this expert panel focused that narrowly. They were much more interested in the second phase of the project, which included examining really where is all of this headed, looking at emerging technologies, thinking about societal trends, evolving patient activities, such as shared decision-making, how medical practices are transforming, and what some of the potential future barriers are, so we could really think about how do we optimize the implementation and better manage patient-generated health information as effectively as possible to contribute to care management. Next slide, please. So this just gives you an outline. So the paper that was presented or was delivered to the Office of the National Coordinator as a result of the full year that the expert panel worked on this topic, it's quite an extensive report. I encourage you to download it. There's a link at the bottom of the page here. It's on the ONC website as well as the HIMSS website. And this is the outline. So it's quite detailed. It, of course, covered sort of the purpose and the value of patient-generated health information, but it also really looks pretty deeply at, what are the challenges from both the patient and provider's perspective, some examples of the type of information, some case studies where this is being implemented already so we can learn from those examples, and actually practical guidance to help practices implement patient-generated health information. And then finally, where are the areas where additional work is needed? And I think this is This is a very hot topic where we just scratched the surface even with a full year of work with these wonderful experts. And I think there's much more work to be done here, but this report I think you'll find very, very informative. Next slide, please. So now sort of turning to the patient engagement framework, and just to tee this up, as I mentioned, this was a result of the consumer consortium on eHealth that we had convened. And that consortium was a collaborative forum of several hundred organizations, again, very diverse, different perspectives, who were interested in sort of coming together and learning from each other, figuring out how to tackle this together, sharing resources and experience. And it became very clear through the work of this consortium that there really was no common definition of what patient engagement in eHealth is. So that's why we embarked on a multi-stakeholder process to really develop and iterate and create the patient engagement framework. This effort, it took about a year, and it was largely led by Leslie Kelly Hall, who's a top executive with HealthWise. She's also served on the Health IT Standards Committee. She was on our NEHC board, and now she's chairing the new HIMSS Center for Patient and Family Engagement. And she was an instrumental leader of this effort. The result is this patient engagement framework, which is designed to guide healthcare organizations in developing and strengthening their patient engagement strategies through the use of eHealth tools and resources. So it's not a comprehensive patient engagement framework. It's really focused on the whole eHealth aspect of that. So I'm going to describe this framework in detail as I go forward. This particular slide highlights the pillars, if you will, or the business drivers for patient engagement, and you'll see as I go into the details how this pulls through the whole framework. So, it's about informing and attracting people to the system. It's about retaining and interacting with people. It's about partnering efficiently, and ultimately creating synergy and extending reach. Next slide, please. So this is the actual patient engagement framework. I know you can't read it on the slide, but this is what you'll be able to download, and I think the PhyTel team will make available to you. But it is actually all on one page. As you can see, there's a lot of detail here. It has, at a high level, so this framework provides a definition of what patient engagement in eHealth is, and it describes a series of phases that an organization can progress through, starting at a very, very basic level over on the left-hand side of the screen with Inform Me, and progressing or evolving to, through a series of phases to the highest level on the right-hand side of the screen that, as you can see, it goes sort of deeper, and that's Support My e-Community, which is the fifth phase. And again, I'll go into detail on these. This framework really serves as a guide or a roadmap to inform organization strategies for how to think about this and how to make progress. So it's Inform Me, Engage Me, Empower Me, Partner with Me, and finally, Support My e-Community. So I'm going to blow up each of these and talk about them. But I will tell you, it's been very exciting to see how the healthcare community has truly embraced this framework. We've heard, it's been downloaded it was probably downloaded 30,000 times in the first 15 or 16 months that it was made available. And, we've heard from health system executives and health information exchange leaders, that they're using the framework to guide their patient engagement strategies, to sort of inventory where they are as an organization and to, decide how to prioritize what they do going forward. We've heard from technology company executives that they've used it as a guide to their product development plan. So the feedback has been really positive in the sense that, people say it's well organized and it's helpful. It doesn't really matter where you are along the continuum, but it can help you kind of organize your thinking and give you a path forward. So let's go to the next slide, please. So starting with phase 1, which is Inform Me, And as you can see, so this is sort of the blow up of the page. And this is the most basic level of patient engagement, and it's intended to really meet providers and healthcare organizations wherever they might be. Many are probably doing a lot of these things, and it gives them a roadmap to make steps in the right direction. In this phase, a provider demonstrates basic levels of patient engagement with an emphasis on the use of simple tools that make healthcare more convenient and accessible. The sections here are information and wayfinding, e-tools, forms, and specific patient-specific education. Examples of information provided at this phase could be, maps and directions to help people find their way around, information on the services available and who the providers are, information on things like advanced directives and HIPAA, privacy requirements and rights, and also specific conditions. So here, as I mentioned earlier, the business driver at this stage is to inform and attract people to the system. Next, please. Phase 2 is Engage Me. And this phase, is indicative of a more mature patient engagement strategy and shows greater use of eHealth tools and resources. In this phase, patients can access their electronic health record. They're encouraged to use fitness trackers and other eHealth tools, so obviously we're trying to encourage good behavior. As Karen said, you can't just tell them what to do, but you give them some tools and you help encourage them to make healthier choices. And then they're also able to complete certain administrative tasks online, things like scheduling appointments, maybe ordering prescription refills. So this phase, Engage Me, is it's basically lined up with meaningful use stage 1. So most folks, if they made it to meaningful use stage 1, they're probably at this Engage Me level of patient engagement. So here also we have a patient profile. So we're beginning to incorporate into the care and engagement process, what are the patient's preferences? Karen talked about Oscar. Not only do the providers need to think about what we want Oscar to do, we need to think about what Oscar wants to do. So we also have in this Engage Me level the capability for patient reminders for things like preventive care, for medications and wellness. So we're starting to really support the patient to be more proactive about their own care and giving them some tools to make that more feasible and easier. And then here, again, with the business drivers and see on the right and left side of the text block here, you can see we're moving from informing and attracting people to the system to retaining and interacting, as you can tell by the capabilities that I described. So let's go to the next slide, please. We have a couple of slides on Empower Me. So phase 3 is Empower Me. Providers in this phase demonstrate advanced patient engagement activities, and they're using health IT in very substantive ways. Attributes at this phase include use of secure messaging between patients and providers, so enabling a dialogue in between visits so that people can, patients can ask questions or provide information to their providers in between their visits, so that might better inform their care if adjustments need to be made. Also here we have the ability for people to request corrections to their medical record, and I'll talk about an example of how that's happening. It's also here we have the ability for people to download and transmit their health record to the patient. The patient has access to it, and then they can also have it sent to the designees of their choice. So that's, view, download, and transmit. That's part of meaningful use. And then we also have online quality, safety, and patient experience ratings at this stage. And go to the next slide, please. So another one on Empower Me. The Empower Me phase also really does begin to integrate patient-generated health information into the electronic health record systems. So this might include things like care experience surveys. It could include symptom assessments, maybe self-management diaries, health history, pre-visit questionnaires, et cetera. Those are just some examples. Providers at this stage are definitely going to be participating in a health information exchange or some similar type of effort to enable the patient's information to follow them to other providers in order to improve care coordination between provider settings and across the whole continuum of care. So, and on the business driver side, again, we're going from retaining and interacting, and now we're really moving to a true partnership between the provider and patient team. So let's go to the next slide, please. Phase 4 is Partner with Me, and this phase reflects providers who use health IT to make the patient a true partner in his or her care. Providers at this level are, they're supporting their patients with condition-specific management tools and access to care summaries. They integrate significant amounts of ongoing patient-generated health information, such as preferences, self-care, wellness, and even home health device data, into, directly into the electronic health record system. So they've got protocols set up to make that work. Shared decision-making and collaborative care and patient accountability. These are really key attributes of this Partner with Me phase. Very similar and in alignment with what Karen described as part of the NCQA standards for patient-centered medical home. I think there's a lot of parallels here. The patient records are connected to public health reporting system in this phase, and you really have coordination of care happening seamlessly across all settings, primary, specialty, acute care, et cetera. And the Partner with Me really emphasizes team care, collaboration, and shared accountability for health. And then we're going up to the final level, and let's go to the next slide, please. So Support My eCommunity is phase 5 on the framework. And this is largely an aspirational phase for most organizations. This phase is the culmination of providers' progress in fully leveraging and implementing eHealth tools to connect a patient with their full care team and support his or her care management both within and outside of the healthcare setting. Tools and activities here, of course, include fully interoperable electronic health records, record sharing among providers and non-provider members of the patient's care team, shared care plans with team outcomes, and truly integrated and collaborative care. At this phase, we also have patients and caregivers are provided with opportunities for e-visit, online community support from providers, and information like cost comparisons and outcome reporting can help the patients make more informed decisions about their care and their treatment. Providers at this phase are definitely going to be participating in an accountable care or patient-centered medical home type model. And next slide, please. I wanted to share with you just a few examples of some organizations that have been using this framework to actually help them define and move forward with patient engagement strategies. So the Kentucky Health Information Exchange is an interesting one. They have a focused consumer engagement strategies, and not all health information exchanges are doing that. So they've been sort of breaking new ground here. And they did this because they recognized the importance of consumer engagement in driving better health outcomes. They also have a very deep commitment to helping their connected providers achieve meaningful use and in particular help them with the patient and family engagement aspects of meaningful use, including, as I mentioned earlier, supporting a person's ability to view, download, and transmit their health record as they see fit. And they have the longer view to support their providers in positioning for accountable care and new payment models. So to support these goals, the Kentucky Health Information Exchange has done multiple things. They created coordinating council committees with the consumer focus. They have a marketing and communications and education campaign to, one, educate the public on the importance of patient engagement, but also to educate providers on why, what they need to do to be more engaged and why it's important. And finally, they've also licensed a tool that enables them to really measure providers' readiness for consumer engagement, and they've made that available to quite a number of interested providers as a way to, really help them be successful for meaningful use, stage 2 and beyond. So that's kind of the Kentucky story. Next slide, please. These examples actually come from the patient-generated health information report that I mentioned earlier, and I'll just highlight a few examples I think that are interesting. The Dartmouth Hitchcock Spine Center developed a process to accept patient-generated health information through an online questionnaire in advance of a patient's visit. So the goal of this program is to provide team-based care and co-development of the feedback process that makes extensive use of patient-generated health information and patient-reported outcome measures. Patients making an appointment are invited to complete a questionnaire at home prior to their office visit. The scheduling workflow at the Spine Center was altered to really adopt this new process, and the clinical staff basically commits to using the data and its summary in the office visit, through a process that's actually embedded into their workflow. The Veterans Health Administration also, is doing a lot. They collect a wide variety of patient-generated health information from multiple sources, including their My Healthy Vet personal health record portal, point-of-service kiosks, mobile applications, home telehealth, and even wearable devices. So the VA has a large-scale care coordination home telehealth program that's designed to provide care management for non-institutional patients with diabetes, congestive heart failure, depression, and other chronic conditions common to older veterans. The program utilizes biometric monitors and messaging devices to communicate and monitor patient-generated health information, doing all of this essentially remotely, so it's much more convenient for the patient. Geisinger Health System in Pennsylvania enables patients to request an amendment, an update or a correction to their record. So through the My Geisinger patient portal, patients complete a structured questionnaire that is pre-populated with the medication list that's in their electronic health record. So using this tool, patients can submit questions and request corrections, such as removing older medications that they're from the active medication list that they're no longer taking, or adding perhaps something they're taking that's from just over-the-counter medication. So, and the process there involves a pharmacist, basically a Geisinger pharmacist, who receives this information and processes the patient's feedback on their medication, and then updates the electronic health record and notifies the patient's physician if they need to discuss or have additional sort of collaborative interaction about whatever changes in the medication list that the patient might have. So the EHR corrections submitted online by the patient, once they're reviewed, they're accepted as if they were, received during a face-to-face clinical appointment. So they've really adapted the workflow to support this. And obviously, we all know the importance of having an accurate medication list. So just a couple quick comments on the last two here. So many of you have probably heard of Blue Button. And this is being widely promoted as a simple way for people to access their own health information. They're getting lots and lots of companies that have the data, whether it's payers or pharmacies or others, to kind of make that available through this Blue Button process. So it's really a way of raising awareness why people should have their own health information, and then creating a push to make it more ubiquitous, if you will. Open Notes is a really interesting project that essentially enables the patient to have full access to their record while the provider is actually documenting their visit. So during the patient visit, the provider and the patient both sort of sign off on what's documented in the record. So that's a really interesting one that did indeed sort of change the behavior and change the the way to articulate and document patient visits. So I think it has important implications as well. So while we're really at the early, pretty early stage of patient engagement, I think these examples really do show that progress is being made, and there's an opportunity to learn from what others are doing, so we can try to further accelerate the progress in the right direction. Next slide, please. So to wrap up, I just wanted to sort of summarize. I mean, this is sort of a high-level summary of the patient engagement framework and its 5 phases that I talked about in some detail. We think it's a helpful tool. We certainly hope that people are finding it useful, and we have certainly appreciated that feedback. So that's just a quick wrap-up slide. And then next slide, please, just to highlight a few sort of takeaways for you. Again, the framework, provides a definition and a roadmap, and it really does align with kind of where everything's going in terms of accountable care and patient-centered medical homes that are all really encouraging greater engagement and ultimately will result in better outcomes that we all hope to have from a cost and quality and value standpoint. And while it may seem daunting, I really encourage you to make patient engagement a priority. We already saw from the poll that it's something that's important to you, and to really, embark on a journey to accelerate your progress. And there are some concrete steps, that we think you can take to make this a reality. First of all, kind of figure out where you are. What tools do you have in place? What strategies do you have in place? How can you get more focused, get more organized, get more coordinated, perhaps, agree on priorities, and then really think about who you serve and how you need to engage with them differently. You can't reach everybody the same way, so you do need to think about how to segment the patient population. And, we think that you really do need a plan. And to have a plan, you really need both, people who are responsible, put somebody in charge, we're saying, and you need a dedicated budget. And it's not just about the patient portal. I think we worry sometimes that, some organizations are putting a patient portal in place, and, they've checked the box on patient engagement. So remember, patient engagement is not just about a single tool. It's about having the right capabilities and tools that enable you to truly more effectively engage people in their care. And next slide, please. So this just shows you where you can download. And again, I think the FITEL team will be sending these documents out, but you can these give you the links to the patient engagement framework and the white paper that could be helpful. And then last slide, I think we can open it up. I'll turn it back to Karen. We can open it up for Q&A.
Thanks, Kate. That was really terrific. And now we're ready for questions. We hope that you'll go to the area on your screen where you can enter questions, and we will field them as they come in. So while we're waiting, though, we already have a couple. So, Kate, based on your knowledge, and you laid out a nice plan for what people should do to get started, but what are the biggest challenges or roadblocks that people are having or organizations are having in taking those first steps?
Well, I think the biggest thing, and I'm sure you have a viewpoint on this as well, Karen, but, I think the biggest thing is that everyone is so overwhelmed. We've got meaningful use, which is overwhelming. Many have just implemented EHRs in recent years, and that's a whole lot of change and challenge. We've got ICD-10 coming. So I think, and you've got accountable care, and you've got all these many, many different requirements, and at the same time, everybody's trying to cut costs and get more efficient and all of that kind of thing. I think it's mostly just people are overwhelmed. I think that, in my experience, people want to do the right thing, but they're just really overwhelmed. And I think that it's tools like the framework and some of the case studies and things like that that give people better, sort of simple ways to kind of carve it up and try to make even incremental progress.
Thank you. We have another question now. One person is saying that their health system is having difficulty engaging their older population who are not as tech savvy. So how they want them to interact more with the patient portal. What has your experience been with this?
Well, you hear that. You hear that a lot, just like you hear about people saying, older physicians don't want to adopt technology. I personally don't think it's necessarily about age. I think it's about personality. So I think, I can say my 84-year-old mother uses email and probably never expected to do that. So I think that there are ways to get people comfortable with the technology, but I also think that, that you need to engage with people where they are. And so in that case, maybe a phone call is better than secure messaging, to engage somebody and to know, how they're doing or how they're managing their chronic condition. So I do think we have to engage with different segments of the population differently, and there's not going to be just one technology solution that works for everyone.
Okay. We still have time for some more questions, so please enter some others that you may have. But here's another one. Kate, how do smaller practices take advantage of the technology or any technologies like mobile apps and some of the other things that might be available to them that you described? Are there ways that they can access these tools affordably?
I think there are ways. I mean, there's certainly some payers that are partnering with providers, even small providers, to offer up tools and resources. So I think that there are payers that are trying to make it easier for smaller practices to have access to some of those other technology tools. I think that even some of the medical societies, have tools for practices if they're, for members that are, a part of the Academy of Family Physicians or other medical societies. I think that the web tools seem to be pretty accessible. So, I mean, I've seen a number of small practices that have great websites and great portals. So I think, while it's not easy necessarily, since they're overwhelmed, as I described providers before, I think there are a number of different ways that they're getting there.
Another question on patient-generated data. You talked about the Geisinger using a health risk assessment through their portal, I believe you described, to collect information that then would pre-populate the EMR before the patient came in for a visit or could be acted upon otherwise. Now, Geisinger is a big, huge system. Are there standard tools and HRAs and other things out there that practices can use to get them started, or do they need to invent them?
I, off the top of my head, I couldn't point you to templates for that, but I would imagine that they are out there. so you have somewhere to start from. And in fact, I think we have in the appendix of that paper I mentioned, I think there's some samples there. But, I think there are some standards out there, but sometimes you need to tailor it. And that particular Geisinger project that I mentioned was sort of narrowly focused just on the medication list. So even that you could do, not through the port. You know what I mean? Like you could do that. You could create a standard form and just give them their. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be through a big, big portal like that. It could be a kind of a lower cost, simpler tool.
Okay. So we have one more question. So, one of the things that I was wondering if you're seeing much of are things more like e-visits and more adoption by providers of finding alternative ways to communicate with patients or using beyond the portal. Do you have examples where they're using texting or they're using other forms of automating communications to one or many patients?
Yeah, it's been an interesting trend, and I'd say this has been going on for a few years now around the remote visits, right? So like there's a couple of different companies, I think America Well, I think there's a few others that basically partner with payers and ensure that that providers get paid for remote visits, and so in that sort of situation, especially in rural communities where access might be an issue and maybe it's not necessary to go in for an in-person visit, I think it's an amazing tool. And I've seen actually at the at UPMC in Pittsburgh, just for example, I had the opportunity to tour. They have a technology center, and they show how they use remote technologies to really manage patients in their homes, and it's pretty amazing. I think it's the wave of the future myself, and I think it could, especially where access is an issue, and perhaps with older populations where it's really difficult to get into, to see someone, and if it's something that can be managed remotely, isn't that better for everyone?
Great. Thank you, Kate. Excellent answers.
Well, thank you.
Sure. At this time, I really would like to thank you, Kate, as well as you, Karen, for your time today. Just to remind everybody, our next executive webinar series is July 22nd from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. It's on population health management using quality measures to drive improved patient outcomes with industry expert and thought leader on population health, Dr. Richard Hodak. At this time, the webinar has ended. Thank you again for your attendance and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.